How do you anticipate Trump's tariff policies to actually impact American manufacturing? And if you do have any insight into what type of sectors and maybe regionally where you see the most impact?
Well, I think I think it's his whole focus is to reshore these 5 million manufacturing jobs we lost, particularly high value added, manufacturing around things like the automobile industry and other things. Right now, when they say they make stuff in America, it's really we assemble last stage, assemble stuff just so they can kind of game the system to then get access to the American market. President Trump, I think, is fundamentally trying to reindustrialize America. It deindustrialized for 40 or 50 years and really exacerbated by allowing China into the World Trade Organization, most favored nation status, which it's been gaming the system ever since then. So his focus is bringing high value added manufacturing jobs back, particularly those 100,000 factories with 5 million jobs. I think principally it's going to help in the Midwest and the upper Midwest, but people shouldn't dismiss the Sun Belt, parts of the South, the West, etc. So I think it's going to be full board, and I think that's why people are so excited about it. It's going to be a tough fight, but folks should understand, and particularly all the, kind of uh, spin people have been saying about reciprocity. If you think about it, the East Asian countries that are really right now kind of stacked up with Lutnick and Secretary Bessent working at these deals, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Vietnam, the Philippines, and India, those big countries in East Asia, you haven't seen any public blowback about the non-tariff barriers that we identified that had to be part of it. And they're all in negotiations and discussions.
I want to ask you about this idea of reshoring manufacturing because it seems to be a little bit confusing in the sense that so the St. Louis Fed, for example, shows that actually industrial production in the US is pretty high and it's on an upward trend, but it's industrial employment that is quite low. And many have attributed that to automation. You might attribute that to foreign labor, foreign markets, but the US is still right now, it's the second largest manufacturing country, second to China, of course, but it's a pretty big gap ahead of three and four. And so what does reshoring really mean? And how does that
Reshoring
relate
is
to
like
automation?
let's take the automotive industry is perfect because automotive industry is central to us as industrial power. And you keep seeing, oh, made in America and these cars made. No, Ford and these they do what you're seeing in that manufacturing is final assembly. That's why you don't have a ton of these high value added manufacturing jobs. So you have final assembly. And why they have final assembly? The high value added parts are made in Germany or made in Mexico with Germany companies and somehow in Canada, and the system's game to get it through here. This is basically saying, okay, we want to stop the games. We want to bring back we want to become essentially a manufacturing superpower and hegemon like we used to be. Because President Trump's theory of the case, and it hasn't changed since he really, the first decades of him not even getting into public life or political life, but just getting into public life, he would go on shows in the 80s and the 90s, and it basically be preaching the gospel according to Lou Dobbs, which you had to bring manufacturing jobs back here to basically close the trade deficit and have an economy that was predicated on manufacturing, not service. That's what he's talking about. So I understand. I think we do $2 trillion, over $2 trillion of manufacturing. How much of that is really high value added manufacturing versus final assembly so that you can get access to the US market? The way the president looks at the US market is a premium market. So people around the world are going to have two choices. You're either going to pay higher tariffs to get access to this premium market, or you're going to work to shift your manufacturing back here. Today on the show, we actually had an energy expert was talking about the manufacture of turbines or turbines. And turbines are now getting in Greenville, South Carolina. They're reaching full capacity. It turns out Mitsubishi and Siemens and other foreign people already have plants here, and they're adding to those plants because they understand with President Trump's tariffs, they want to be manufacturing in the United States. And that's what you're seeing when President Trump talks about the several trillion dollars of commitments from companies. And I don't include hedge funds. I don't include private equity. I particularly include sovereign wealth funds like either the Saudis, UAE, or even Masasan with SoftBank. I'm saying from companies that are publicly reporting that have made these announcements out to shareholders, right? So they'll be held responsible and accountable for their fiduciary responsibility, have talked about pretty significant reshoring and major, massive capital investment here in the United States. Now, all of it's not going to be like the old days where you get, hundreds of thousands, just one thing. And let me be specific. Apple's committed to $500 billion of manufacturing here. It's quite evident they're leaving mainland China. They're going to go partly to India and part they're bringing back here. They announced, I think, in the $500 billion investment, which will be over multiple years, at least initially 20,000 jobs. So that's not going to bring, that's obviously going to be highly robotic. There'll be, these will be probably more managerial information, but that's fine. That's part of what modern manufacturing is. And I think that this is going to create, because around this manufacturing, an entire ecosystem evolves of companies that support it, not just supporting services of the coffee shops and the boutiques and where people go to lunch and hang out from the factory, but also the consulting firms, the engineering design firms, the little component manufacturers, the people that actually do all these things, that kind of interconnectivity inside the factories. It's that kind of hive that we need back here that we used to have in the old days. I think it's going to be incredibly exciting, and I think it's going to rejuvenate big parts of the country.
I know you're a populist and you often say that you're fighting for the working class. Do you feel as if there's an appetite for American workers to want to work in the factory, or do you feel like they're more maybe like correlated to this like hive notion of the boutiques and the surrounding sort of
No,
ideas?
we have, this is it. Remember, 9 million people. People say, well, Steve, people don't want these jobs. I said, at good wages, they would love to have these jobs because you can actually have a career. I keep saying, like in the service business, I've said this now for 20 years because I came out of the service business at Goldman Sachs and financial services. That my firm, the service business for working people is all gig economy. If you look at even insurance companies, all this stuff, it's all kind of one gig to the next. It's very tough to get lifetime employment or career employment. You have 401ks, you have retirements. There are some companies, but that is all the service business. Particularly sometimes the margins get crushed there. It is very much gig economy. Here in manufacturing, you actually have a chance to get a skill set that you can use over a long period of time and actually have a high paying job. And that's why I think when people start to see that, they're going to say, yes, we want these jobs and all the ancillary jobs around that part of the ecosystem. That's not the service part, not the restaurant, not the boutique, not the coffee shop, not the place to kind of go hang out, and other things related to service business, but actually kind of that ecosystem of what you need. Lena Khan, who I think so highly of, that was over the FTC. Her specialty before she got there was all the economic analysis of kind of those little businesses that come up around the ecosystem of manufacturing. This is when America was at its greatest, when we had that. And so this is why I think it's so important for us to bring it back. And as a populist, to me, this is one of the foundational elements of the solution to make sure that Wall Street and the financiers and everybody that made all the high returns on capital, shipping the jobs overseas and are really exploiting Lao Beijing, the Chinese labor pool, will start to have more higher returns on high returns on work. And I think you can see the sunlit uplands. It's going to take us a while to get there. It's not going to happen overnight, but you see the process that started. And it's one of the most fundamental shifts in the country. Hell, we've been deindustrializing for 50 years. And now finally you got the start of it. I had a guy today said, President Trump, and including Reagan and all the Republicans, says you finally have an economic nationalist as the president and a guy that's really pro-tariff. And he says you haven't had that since the 19th century.
Yeah. And just to touch a little bit on this timeline aspect, do you have any sort of like, are you seeing this in like decades? Are you seeing this like what is sort of your
Oh no,
measure?
I think immediately you're going to start seeing things already. I think you've seen, and one thing I think is going to come to the forefront. There are thousands of small entrepreneurial manufacturing companies here in apparel and boots and all types of things of craftsmanship from Maine down to the South, all over, of people that start off and have maybe 25 or 30 or 40 people. You're going to start to see that explode because I think this is a whole mindset, and particularly with this younger generation coming up that's kind of so MAGA, that there's a whole return to buy American and hire American. I think you'll see an explosion of that. No, I think you're seeing this. Obviously, it's a strategy that to do the entire thing is going to take a while, but I think you're immediately going to start to see expansion of plants, different R&D centers built up, all of it. I think you'll start seeing it immediately. What disappoints me too is that because I did a town hall and I see this constantly, it's shocking. I think this gets to the heart of the political issue of the Democratic Party. they so have not used the muscles of economic nationalism in supporting the working class in the middle class. They're kind of the billionaires in the credential class that they don't even know how to speak. They are literally taking the talking points of Wall Street, of the sociopathic lords of easy money on it's inflationary, it's a tax. I mean, they sound like they're from they sound like their talking points are coming from the Cokes. That's also it's going to be a tax. It's a tax. That's Coke talk, right? There are ways to debate this and maybe refine it on the edge. But the left right now, it's pretty amazing how they're just doing Coke talk to like the talking points come from Americans for Prosperity and given right to the left, or give it directly to the left to be able to counter this kind of economic populism that's really coming forth from President Trump.
And you touched on this earlier about these like final assembly plants. So how do you see those plants being impacted? Because right now, under tariffs, particularly with aluminum and steel, they're gonna have heavy tariffs to import the parts, of course. And so their final product is gonna have to be more
Well,
expensive.
I do think you're seeing that's just some of the things that President Trump's trying to work through already with the automotive industry to make sure that the pieces that we're doing are all interconnected so prices don't explode here. But we've got to bring back really steel and aluminum. That's kind of the basics. And we started in the first term. Biden was too concerned to kind of pull it off. And look, I'm opposed to the Japanese owning even a big minority share in U.S. Steel. I think that I'm a huge advocate of the merger of U.S. Steel and Cleveland-Cliffs and to build an American superpower as far as steel goes. So I think those things are all being worked out. I know because I talk to Navarro every day. They are burning the midnight oil over there, refining this to make sure that we get the formula exactly right. And I think that's why you're seeing either proclamations or tweaks to all these policies on a daily basis, and it's going to take tweaks. You've got a team. Here's the thing between Jameson Greer over as the U.S. Trade Rep, Peter's entire team over at the EOB on the White House campus, Howard Lutnick and a big team at Commerce, and now Besant. Scott's a really, very smart deal guy. Plus, he's got an entire team on this. People should know you've got every day in the U.S. government, I don't know, probably 1,000 people that this is what they're doing nonstop, running numbers, working, even making sure they're working with the Costcos and working with the Walmarts of the world to have any kind of logistics problems, any kind of supply chain problems. But that being said, we are, at a pretty full embargo to the Chinese Communist Party, and that's going to probably come to a head over the next couple of weeks.
And do you foresee that some of these tariffs impacting the actual construction of factories? Is that going to limit how many factories can be built based on the raw materials
There's
being?
always going to be capacity limitations and various things. I think that'll all be worked out in kind of the free market. But yes, the one thing is that, hey, talk about a high class problem. Right? You have problems and super crises, problems, and high class problems. A high class problem is a little bit of capacity restraint that we're building too many plants. There's too much demand. There's too much demand for construction workers. There's too much demand for steel and aluminum. We may get there. I hope we get there soon. That's the kind of problem I want to see, and I think that's the types of things that the Peter Navarros of the world over the White House are working on right now. So let's have at it. I want to have some capacity constraint there to show that the vibrancy. Once this manufacturing base is back, you're going to see a vibrancy that you haven't seen in a while. There's a great book from the 1990s that I really, if people could give a glance to, a guy named Tom Peters wrote a book that was a massive bestseller, right? Massive bestseller, probably the time your parents were just starting to date. It was the early 1990s, and it was called In Search of Excellence. And it had the whole theory of management by wandering around. It talked about Hewlett Packard and how Silicon Valley, the great tech companies, how they were built. And how they were built were tinkering and people that were kind of tinkerers. And you had the workshops and the research departments right next to the manufacturing. That's the America we're going back to. And people say, oh, Trump and Bannon and Navarro, it's all this nostalgia for the 1950s. That was an ecosystem that worked. It created America into a superpower in the tech area, and you can bring that back. And that's what President Trump's bringing back. And I'm telling you, it's to the core of who he is as a person and core of who he is as a politician. So this ain't gonna, I mean, he ain't gonna back off this. He may tweak it, as President Trump said at the town hall last night. He's about flexibility. He's a guy that will call an audible, but directionally, this train's left the station and it's hurtling down the track.
Do you foresee a potential short-term concern of manufacturers actually disincentivizing manufacturing because they can't afford the parts to either build their factories or build their initial
I, do,
stuff?
I don't
You
see
don't see
that.
that.
I think listen, the great thing about, true free market capitalism is the entrepreneurial nature of these people. They'll do workarounds. I don't see that as a huge problem. Listen, in any endeavor like this, we spent 50 years deindustrializing, at least. We've also spent 20 or 30 years really taking from being an energy superpower and electricity superpower. We followed the kind of German model. We have a massive problem with electrical generation right now to even come back to a manufacturing superpower, which is being changed by some of the EOs that are being written right now on this, the kind of whole decarbonization cult. So you're going to have hiccups. You're going to have, it's the normal course of thing that happens. I think what President Trump's doing is setting a strategy that, hey, we are bringing this back. We're going to use tariffs and non-tariff barriers, and we're going to get in discussions, particularly in East Asia. I don't think anybody should be lost in the fact that is what I've been arguing for years. I don't want to say it's racist, but there's been this obsession with the Cambridge, the Boston, New York, DC, Acela corridor. Okay. Kind of, if you think about same where the foundation of the country was 250 years ago, there's still this mentality that the whole world revolves around them and what happens in London and a small slice of Northwest Europe. And far be it for me to say those are all white people, but those are all white people. And it's just been this obsession that that's got to be it. What I think you see with President Trump and saying, number one, I think the most important thing is that we are a Pacific power and that the future of the world is in the global south and particularly in places like Asia, of which that's why I went over there as a very young man and always wanted to go to Asia. And it's the center kind of I think world growth. It shouldn't be lost on people that the ones when Besant talks about being stacked up, it's our allies of Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, the Philippines, Vietnam, and India are all the first ones lined up over there to work out these trade deals. And so when you talk about something as big as going back and taking the post-war international rules-based order, restructuring that so it puts America first, and at least in our universe, we want every nation to put themselves and their citizens first. That's how we think this thing works out. But you put America first and her citizens first, and particularly those citizens that are the backbone of the country, which are the working class and the middle class. No one in the histories of the nation, even President Reagan, as much as I revere him, has ever done that. And this is pretty remarkable. And just in the first 100 days, or even from Liberation Day, we're not even 30 days into it. The 30th day will be tomorrow, right? So I think it's remarkable. I think the energy is remarkable. Last night when Trump did the town hall, it was 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night. He's got a bunch of CEOs in the anteroom to the Oval. They're going to come in and have a meeting, and he's going to talk to them in the Oval. I don't know, 9 or 10 o'clock at night. This is a guy that's going full steam, but this thing is set. There'll be a lot of perturbations. There'll be a lot of things on the side, but people should look at the overall grand strategy and picture. And this thing's rolling.
Do you have any ideas or predictions about perhaps what other economic levers might be pulled? So tariffs are obviously being used, but do you think there could be tax breaks for factories, or do you think there's going to be
Oh,
something
big.
else? Yeah.
Well, first thing, the three things that are going on right now for people, we talk about, because people are saying, what's that populism and what's nationalism? Over these last 2 weeks in Washington, you've seen that. In economic populism, one is bringing the jobs back for working class people and focus on that. Number two is using the tax code. He's extending the taxes, we know, absolutely, for the middle class and working class. Plus, he's adding in, which has never been conceived of, populist economic, tax cuts on tips, on overtime, and Social Security to kind of do away with it. And he's talking about, hey, I'm looking at my tariff structure to do away with all taxes under $200,000. It's aspirational. You can't do it now because the budget deficits is pretty big. That's why, and people say, oh, he's already dismissed raising tax on wealthy. Nothing could be further from the truth. You can break the news here. That is being hotly debated behind closed doors. I don't hear the Grover Norquist and all these guys say, oh, it's dismissed out of hand. That is absolutely not the case. There's an active discussion to not, because of the massive tax cuts on the populist side, to not extend the tax cuts for the wealthy and maybe even take it up to maybe make it a million, make you a millionaire, not people in the 600,000, but a millionaire. Take care of the entrepreneurs, but make that at 40%. So that's a very active discussion going on. If you then look at what's happening in federal courts right now, his FTC, the FCC's got Paramount hung up and not letting them do their deal now until they get that worked out. The FTC's got Facebook in court right now to try to break it up, essentially, to force it to sell Instagram and WhatsApp as a starter and then go after Zuckerberg. The Justice Department, the antitrust guys, the Justice Department, which are like Elliot Ness's untouchables, have Google in a federal court in DC, in Northern Virginia, in another federal court in DC, trying to break up Google. So you look at that of going after the oligarchs, then you look at the nationalistic policies on manufacturing and what he's doing on trade. It's pretty awe-inspiring that you have populism, nationalism this week in Washington, D.C. at the highest levels. And the president's come out and said, hey, you're not going to cut Medicaid like old school Republicans want to cut Medicaid. MAGA is dependent upon MAGA. They don't want to be dependent upon Medicaid. Why are they on Medicaid? Because all the manufacturing jobs are gone and the service industry doesn't pay enough, right? And they're also not going to pay for your health care. So, this is a complete, total reordering of the American economy focused on the country, but particularly the workers in the country. No socialist government's done this. No communist government's done this. This is an entrepreneur, a free market capitalist entrepreneur, Donald Trump, that's doing it. And to me, it's just awe-inspiring.
And let me ask you about this labor force. So one, we have a pretty low unemployment right now. It's around 4%. Do you
Well,
for
how do you say that? But hang on a second. Let's get back to the numbers. You have 9 million people. You have 9 million people working two gigs, two jobs. And so many of these jobs are gig economy jobs. They're barely jobs hanging on. They're not high value. And you have, I don't know, 12 million men, 14 million men out of the workforce that have punched out. The employment in this country is not great. That's a Wall Street, that's a running dog stat they give you that the left and MSNBC talks all the time about. That you're just repeating Wall Street's madness. Employment in this country is not great. You know why? Because they're not great jobs. And first off, you shouldn't have people working. I can tell you, I know the jobs ain't great because you have $1.4 trillion of credit card debt, and I think 10% of it's non-performing because people are using their credit cards to make ends meet, and 9 million people are working two jobs. And so another stat I can look at is student loans. You got, I don't know, $1.7 trillion of student loans that people can't pay them back. Why can't they pay them back? They don't have great jobs. So
well,
no,
also attributed to economic
the
factors.
job market, yes, it's relatively low employment on statistics that show that. But when you get below those statistics, you see that it's not a great picture. And it sucks for the working class. And it really sucks for? It sucks for people under 35 years old. That's why I call them, they're like Russian serfs. They don't own anything and they're not going anything. And hey, guess what? With the advances in artificial intelligence that are coming this year and next year, not some Buck Rogers in 10 years. I'm talking about the next 18 months. You're going to see the entry level or first couple of years jobs of managerial, administrative, and tech coding that are all going to be wiped out. And so that's what we have to get ahead of and make sure we're planning for. And I think you're seeing that with President Trump.
I'm curious how you see these jobs not being filled by automation. Like, how do you see these factory jobs being great jobs? Because won't most of them be filled by robots?
No, I don't think so. Some. There's clearly automation. You clearly have productivity increases with automation, but no, I don't think they're going to be all filled with automation at all. I just don't.
Okay, so not a ton are going to automation, but do you foresee if there's this
No,
in
no, I didn't say not a ton. I didn't say not a ton. It's gonna be a lot of automation. It just will be. But people make the automation. Remember, you got to make the automation. It's gonna be quite positive.
and do
But
you
it's not all. We're not doing this to have an army of robots make everything.
and do you foresee then people leaving other industries to join manufacturing? Like, do you see if we're adding these new
Oh
jobs,
yes,
see people leaving
definitely,
other
definitely.
industries? And which
Yeah,
industries?
absolutely. I think you're going to see. Well, I think you're going to see. First off, a lot of people in the service industries one of the things for young people in particular, I shouldn't say young, virtually everybody, the anxiety and angst that modern capitalist society puts on people all the time. You're 90 days, you get laid off, you're 90 days away from economic oblivion, right? Even if you're middle class. I tell people, I said, hey, you may be middle class, but think about it. If you're out for 90 days and can't get a job and it doesn't look like you will hit the panic button. All of a sudden, can I pay the mortgage? What about the kid's school? People get seized up. And I know this from talking to people all the time. That anxiety eats on people's health. It makes it a less happy and robust society. And people tell me all the time, oh, I've heard this for years. Oh, the service economy is going to this. Well, people in the service economy are always sitting there going, hey, when are we going to have the next restructuring? When are we going to have the next layoff? Right. So it's, and particularly at the entry level and the people, what we call the below the line people, right? Maybe not the decision makers. I think you're going to see a ton of people start to transition over and say, hey, look, and particularly the fact that maybe a lot of these places are built in places that are not the central cities. In New York's probably not going to come back as the manufacturing superpower it used to be. I would love to see that. It's probably not going to happen. I think you're going to see the heartland of America where a lot of these plants are. You see some of the car announcements on the car plants and other things. It's in the part of the country I think you're going to see rejuvenated. And you get to small town America, you get a manufacturing job. The houses are cheaper, right? The schools are smaller. I think this is just continual great benefit after the other. Also, I think if we're smart on the corporate tax cuts and target like I wanted to do in 17, you can actually rejuvenate St. Louis and Detroit and some of these great urban areas that have gone think by targeting tax cuts specifically about building like manufacturing there.
Is there any part of American society you think won't be touched by this?
I hope the part that's touched is frickin' layoffs to the at the corporate level of these globalist corporations that are domiciled in the United States, have taken advantage of the United States' safety and security and have done nothing but rape and pillage the working class in this country. I hope we start to have layoffs there. I hope Wall Street and what they did in the financialization of the economy, I hope that that doesn't continue on. No, I think the people that benefited and basically lived off the carcass of a dying America as an industrial power. I hope that those days of their country clubs and their three martini lunches and all the fat cats and flying around, I hope that those days are going to come to an end. I would love to see them. I would love to see them get them comeuppance, given all the agony they put working class Americans and middle class Americans through. So no, I would love to see that. Not that I'm about retribution or revenge at all, right? But I think there's so many great things happening. I think there's so many great happening. I think it's a great time to be an American citizen because finally someone in power is sitting there and going, hey, in the way that the imperial capital works, not in the room, not in the deal. And we're putting you in the room. And you're going to get a special deal. The American citizens, because the whole system rests on their shoulders, the national security system with their sons and daughters, being everywhere to secure the world. And it's, on the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War, where we lost 58,000 men and women. And in addition, we have tens of thousands of wounded and PTSD and broken homes. I think it's quite a day to be talking about putting American workers and American citizens first. And that's the whole central part of the MAGA. Make America great again. You know how you make America great again? It's quite simple. You put the country first and you put the workers and citizens first, and things are going to work out.
And that right there, is that what you would classify as winning this manufacturing and trade war? Is that what it looks like?
Yes, 100%. It's back to a robust America that's America's return as a reindustrialized manufacturing superpower with workers getting fantastic jobs, fantastic wages, where if they so choose, whether it's the husband or the wife, they can choose that one income can support a healthy family and allow, if they want to, their spouse to be at home with the kids. I think that'd be I think people would say that is a pretty damn good solution. I'll sign up for that. And I think that's what President Trump's driving to.
And do you have any idea of when you think that timeline would be? Like, when would you say we've won this?
It's always a continual process. The world's a competitive place. I think you're seeing right now, you're winning right now by even you have the world's great trading powers that have ripped off the United States, not because the Japanese are bad people or the Indians are bad people or the Vietnamese. It was the leaders in the United States that did this. The villains here are not our foreign competitors, right? It's just like the villains are just like in the invasion of the southern border, the 10 million. Those people are not the issue. They would have done what you and I have naturally done if we had been invited here to the United States. It's the elites in this country that sold the country out and sold their countrymen out for decade after decade after decade. And some billionaire for Queens finally showed up 10 years ago, and we've been in this long struggle to turn the thing around against all these globalists. That's the story of our age. That's the story of politics. Yes, you have all these details. That's the story of the Democratic Party. All these voters, all these issues were Democrat Party. I come from a Democratic Union family. It's inconceivable. It's inconceivable back when I was a kid in the 50s and particularly 60s, to even think about voting for Republican was not even in it was not even discussed. If you had mentioned it, you'd probably been slapped and go stand in the corner. What are you talking about? Who's the weird son we got? Right? That's all changed. You can't have a discussion. We talk more about working class issues every day on War Room in one day show. And people love the audience come. Then MSNBC will do in a month in prime time. They just don't discuss it. It's not there. They don't have that muscle. You can tell today, like when AOC and these people on the oligarchs tour, it misses the mark. They don't land it. The reason they don't land it, it's all credential class happy talk, right? It's all credential class happy talk. The working class issues have just, and you have Ro Khanna, who I think's terrific. You got Fetterman, who I think is great. You got Sherrod Brown, who I think is a real populist, right? You got three people and maybe a couple more, and you don't see Ro Khanna on prime time every night. Or if he's there, he's like an exotic, well, who is this guy, right? What is he? Economic patriotism. Why are you in Ohio? He's treated as an exotic plant, right? What is this? They don't even know how to ask him questions. And they don't even get Fetterman on there. Fetterman talks about, we don't want the Japanese investing in U.S. steel. We want to put the companies together and work for workers. He's not even invited on anywhere. And hell, you never see Sherrod Brown on anywhere because they're not interested in those topics. They're interested in all this kind of weirdness. That's why they've lost the workers. That's why Trump, this is a plan. Is it going to be accomplished tomorrow? No, it will not be. Is it going to be accomplished the next day? No, it's not. But I tell you what, the day of its accomplishment is closer every day that we're here because we've started the journey. And the world is like, wow. And that's why do you think the Japanese are here talking? Why do you think the Filipinos are here talking? Why Taiwan? Why Korea? These are manufacturing mini superpowers, right? India. They're all here because they all want to be part of it. And they know that they're going to be part of it. And this thing's going to work out. It's going to work out great.
Let me just ask my last thing. Are you informally advising at all? It seems like you've moved a bit closer to Trump advisors. Are you taking a bigger role?
What are you talking about? Scott Bessent was a contributor for 3 years in War Room. Russ Vogt was a contributor for 4 years in War Room. Peter Norrar was a co-host.
Totally. No,
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't think. Yeah, I don't think we need. I don't think we. I don't think. I'm close enough. I'm too close. No, this is all, and it's all. If you go back in Project 2020 and everything CRA worked on, it's all. This has all been years, and from the first term, Stephen Miller and Navarro. This is a continuum. You got to look at this. This really came onto the scene and really started coming up in 2013, 14 about immigration and the arguments we were making about immigration that at the time that this was going to destroy African American low skilled workers and Hispanic. And it was really the elites kind of wanting it was their replacement theory, right? And those kind of involved. And then the thing on the campaign, one of the things I did immediately is we got to focus more on the blue wall and talk about China and President Trump. That was natural. And if you see the converging things in the last 100 days of the 16 campaign, it was manufacturing jobs in China in the north and seal the border, right, and immigration everywhere else. I mean, they crossed over, don't get me wrong, but those two themes are what drove home. And Hillary Clinton's the perfect example. Remember, really the globalization, the real part of it politically, it started economically, but it was Bush 41 and Clinton. Those two administrations are not that different in their economic outlook. That was really the belief. And Clinton used to go up to New Hampshire all the time and tell people these jobs aren't coming back. And I would sit there in the time and go, what are these people talking about? It's like they treat these economic structures and deals like the second law of thermodynamics. the ruling class in this country convinced everybody that these were natural properties of physics, right? Of life, that it had to be like this. The answer is it does not have to be like that. That's a conscious decision of humans. And if you want to unwind that and do it a different way, you can. That's what Trump's doing. He's basically saying he's standing athwart history and saying, hey, this is not working. We've gutted the country. We've destroyed the working class. In the process of destroying the middle class, which is the backbone of the country. It's going to stop, and it's going to stop on my watch. This has been a 10-year fight, 12-year fight from Trump in politics. Remember, we're just 4 weeks away from the day he came down the escalator. This has been a fight for 10 years. It's going to be a fight 10 years from now. The forces of globalization are not just going to sit there and go, oh, this is a great idea that, Navarro and Trump and Bannon and all these guys, this is terrific. Let's just do it. No, it's going to be a continual fight every day. But you can tell that we have the upper hand because politically, people are now coming to this, and it's going to be like a 1932 political realignment.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for your time. You were more than
Thank
generous.
you.
I
No,
really appreciate it.
I love you guys at Newsweek, and I'm over at the site every day. So thank you guys. You guys do amazing coverage. I don't know, you must have 2,000 people beavering away all the time because your coverage on everything is
Figuring
amazing.
away. Yes, that's one way to put it. Well,
Yeah.
thank you. Good luck with the rest of your day,
Thanks.
and
Good.
I'll be in
Thanks.
touch with your team.